Thank you for inviting me to be here. It's fun to talk about SD-WAN, and I want to give you our perspective on SD-WAN because it's not kind of the traditional way of just path selection, reducing costs. So we've been on a long journey looking at customer problems. How do customers come into the cloud, line of business applications, retail? And so what happened was for us, we started looking a few years ago, we had a major retail customer come to us. It's a big name, but they have a bunch of little small shops. 3,000 to be exact across the United States. And they wanted 3,000 tunnels basically to hit their line of business applications running in Azure. So I don't know if you manage 3,000 IPsec tunnels, but it's practically impossible to do that manually. And so that started us looking at large-scale VPN. My team is called the hybrid team because we do work on connectivity solutions. We do believe there will be assets left on premises. And so we focus on that, how we're going to look at that. So for us, you hear our mantra coming out of Azure about the intelligent cloud, the intelligent edge. And that's very important for us. So there are things running in the cloud, the line of business applications, mission critical, moving to the cloud. And there's the edge. And the edge is kind of a new territory. We're looking at that from edge computing, multi-access edge compute as well, looking at 5G, private 5G. But more importantly for this talk, we're really looking at SD-WAN, how do we help large-scale VPN? How do we help these customers come into the cloud? And I want to give you some, the background for this, is how we thought about this. We knew that SD-WAN was kind of the latest buzzword hitting the enterprise. The enterprises are looking to re-architect their networks now, and SD-WAN was part of that funding proposal. It had to be there, right? So how do you think about the network? What's changed over the past 10 years? And really the fundamental change that we saw was Office 365. So Office 365, you move your Exchange servers from deep in your data center, and you move them up into the cloud. All of a sudden, you have a ton of north-south traffic coming in. So as the network architect, how do you scale that? How much bandwidth do you need? What's the security policy? Can your firewalls handle this? How do you plan to be ahead of all that? And so that was really driving this new re-architecture. And then for us, and I'll show you a quick picture, we have a huge global network. Now, Office 365 is a global service. It's very different than Azure. So Azure, you put your Azure resources somewhere, like you'll put them in the Bay Area. So you go West US, you say exactly where I want my storage, exactly where I want my compute. But with Office, it's just spread everywhere. We want the experience to be wherever you go, there it is. And so we do a lot of traffic engineering on our side, in our WAN. And that's where our strong guidance is, get into the Microsoft network as quickly as possible so that we can do the traffic engineering to give you that optimal experience. Now, at the same time, again, we do believe that some assets will stay on premises in customer data centers. So you want high bandwidth connectivity to that. 10 gig, we now offer 100 gig connectivity to our backbone network. And so how do you bring all this together? How do you simplify that? And then the other thing that we saw that was concerning, and that was kind of touched on by the previous panel, the SD-WAN solutions were proprietary in nature. All the magic they gave you was proprietary. And that's just not our style. So we've been pushing very hard on standardization. We do have a good standard for VPN today called IPsec, and that's put us in some tension with our SD-WAN partners. And I'll show you who those are in a moment, our partner ecosystem. But we've been in this tussle because we do want to have open standards. We want a fair, open ecosystem, innovation happening on top of that. So that was kind of the context for all that. And then for our goals, fundamentally, it was about simplifying connectivity. We don't want the network to be in the way of cloud adoption because that would hurt our business. So how do we simplify that connectivity? So you have private connectivity, you have internet connectivity. Managing IPsec is challenging. There's no about that. I mean, I run this, I see the support costs for running our VPN business, and it's pretty high. We also, at Microsoft, want this ecosystem of partners, right? So we want a way that you can add value on top of our solutions. And when you look at it, basically we built the cloud to be self-service on demand. And as we work with the large enterprise, it turns out they want self-service, they want full service on demand. And that's where our solution partners can come into play. So we've been talking to the ecosystem. How can you help us? How can we all work together? How can we have high bandwidth? How do we standardize the protocols for interoperability so that you can imagine the future of multinational SD-WAN deployment, and you would have different CPE, different SD-WAN solution providers in different parts of the country. So there may be different trade-offs that need to be made. That's kind of what we're looking for. And then fundamentally, we want a full mesh connectivity. So that's kind of the backdrop as we looked at some of the problems coming at us. Now, for us, in our context, we have this huge global network. right? We run one of the biggest networks in the world. And this is all run by the Azure networking team. Now, the way to think about that, we have these 54 Azure regions. You can think of a region as multiple data centers. But all these regions, all these Microsoft Cloud services are surrounded by the global WAN run by us. Now, the way to get into that WAN is through our POPs. And so we've been extending and enhancing the number of points of presence. So now we have about 160 points of presence. We're continuing to expand that. Basically, that's for latency to get a better Office 365 experience. So we run the CDN for Office called Azure Front Doors for Office and Bing or Office 365. We do that traffic engineering. And so latency, at the end of the day, whatever you do, it's fundamentally limited by how close you are to the end user. And again, that's where our strong guidance came. Get into our network as quickly as possible with the traffic engineering. So I'll show you kind of what that looks like on our side because it does influence the SD-WAN conversation. So when you look at this, when we started looking at building our own data centers, we realized very quickly that the networking gear was taking a large percent of our data centers. And so that wasn't going to scale for us. So we pulled the network out. So we call these regional network gateways, and you see that kind of at the top of that line there. And so now, and we did some innovation on lasers and optics to get our metro network cost down. So we now have 1.6 petabit per second bandwidth, metro network bandwidth here. And then that comes out through our regional network gateway straight out to the local edge site. Now we've been able to get the cost down so much that we have a new SKU on ExpressRoute called ExpressRoute Local, meaning that all the egress charges are bundled in because we can pass that cost savings on to the customers. So if they go onto your network or the customer's network, that's great. So there is no egress charge for that. And now, but the key thing for the SD-WAN discussion, if you look at this picture right here, that the internet and ExpressRoute, our private connectivity solution, they're right next door to each other in our points of presence. So once you get into that network, there's no latency difference to the customer. So now for us, how you get in doesn't matter to us. Really what we want to focus in on, somehow you got into Microsoft, into Azure for these line of business applications, we want to have unified policy enforcement. So we really do want to simplify that from a customer's perspective. So again, this is really important from our architecture perspective. So we have these points of presence. There's the internet, there's private connectivity. So how do you get in? Now the difference is the last mile, right? And that's where SD-WAN can help. So do you load balance between multiple ISPs? Do you use private connectivity coming in? Those are options there. But for us, once you get into our network, all that traffic's treated the same. So this is what we've come up with Azure Virtual WAN. So again, our objective was not load balancing. Our objective really was having this full mesh connectivity. So these branch offices here, they can use the internet. Because we don't assume every branch office will have MPLS. And some of these branch offices may only have one ISP, so they won't even have the opportunity to do path selection. But we did want to simplify all this in one full mesh architecture. So the branch offices may be using IPsec VPN coming in, so over the internet. We also have customers with devices, mobile devices coming in. So SSL VPN. So we selected OpenVPN, an open standard for that as well, so that you can use different devices. And you can see there, it's an Apple device, Android device, Linux device coming in, SSL VPN coming into that. And then we have ExpressRoute. Again, ExpressRoute's our private networking kind of connectivity solution. We offer everywhere from 50 megabits per second up to 100 gigabit per second. The customer gets to choose. Our pricing is public. It's on our website, so there's nothing hidden from them. And so we're bringing this all together. Now, we were able to show some demos last week at our big show called Ignite, where we had path selection. So we had Barracuda, one of our partners, doing path selection across 2 ISPs. We had Fordnet, a new partner of ours, doing path selection between the internet and ExpressRoute. But really, what we're trying to do is create this full mesh architecture. So as things stay in the data centers, and some things will, you have this big topology now. So the branch offices may need to get into the data center. And you may still need high bandwidth connectivity. So 10 gig, 100 gig, what have you there. And if you look across the world, private Ethernet is really inexpensive. And so we're seeing a big pickup of this, of private Ethernet for the data centers. So again, bringing this all together. Now the thing is, once you bring this all together, the most important thing is not how the traffic got into us. The most important thing is doing uniform policy enforcement. So we also have an Azure firewall service that we've bundled into this. So now you can have policy enforcement on top of this. And again, our guidance on Office 365 is to get into the Microsoft backbone as quickly as possible. So you want local breakout. So even if you're using MPLS for your Office traffic, you should get out onto the internet as quickly as possible. All the Office traffic's encrypted, it's secure by design. So that's what we're trying to bring all together in this kind of thing, and also do it with partners. So it's very important to us that we have these SD-WAN partners with us. So again, when we looked at this, if you have hundreds or thousands branch sites, it's too hard to manage manually these IPsec tunnels. What we've done on our side, we have an API. So we have a simple API our SD-WAN partners can call. The SD-WAN partners are really good at understanding the logistics for all the branches. The IP subnets based on the branches, how to set up the IPsec tunnels. And so then they can call this API and automatically establish all these tunnels. So this is what we've been pushing pretty hard with our SD-WAN partners. How do you handle large-scale VPN? How do you take advantage of path selection for SD-WAN? How do you incorporate private connectivity? And then how do you enable full mesh connectivity? And that's what we've been pushing really hard. And again, we've been in some tension with our partners over this because we're pushing really hard to standardize an IPsec because it's a known standard. Everybody knows how to debug IPsec, and we have a lot of debugging tools around IPsec. So we do want a standardized approach to this, a fair open ecosystem, and everybody competing on top of that. And we've been able to do that successfully with ExpressRoute. If you look at ExpressRoute private connectivity, everything facing the partner and the customer standard. It's BGP, VLANs, Q&Q, things like that. For us, the proprietary side on the Microsoft side is how we on-demand program the routers, the SD-WAN capability or SDN capabilities of programming routers. That's how we differentiate ourselves to have on-demand connectivity. But it's a fair open ecosystem, which allows innovation, because now our partners can have different SLAs, different business models, and customer choice. And that's really what we drive for. So let me go a little bit deeper to show you now as we bring that all together in a topology. So now the first thing we've announced now is full mesh connectivity. So we have specific Azure regions. So imagine West US, East US, maybe you're picking a region in Europe, right? So bringing that all together and bringing that all, so now you're virtualizing that entire WAN. And so again, we don't do last mile, we don't do spectrum, so we're dependent on our network carrier partners to bring us that traffic. And so there's a lot of partnership opportunities moving forward. Now, if you start looking at the flows, the first thing is you may have IPsec connectivity coming over the internet to get to your line of business application running in a virtual network. Virtual network for us is basically the customer brings their private IP address space, RC1918. So it's their address space, they're accessing it from their branch offices. And that may be they come in locally from one region, maybe need to transport to a different region to get there. So maybe you come in the US, we backhaul that to you to Europe, and then pop out there to get your Azure resources in Europe. Next thing is that you may want to use private connectivity for your big data centers, but in your branches. And your branches may need to get a line of business application that stayed behind in the data center. So in that case, on the right side from region 2, you see us using IPsec to get on the internet, but then I use a 10 gig ExpressRoute circuit to get to my data center. So again, just bringing this all together, so it doesn't matter anymore where anything lives. We've now brought it all together with full mesh connectivity, and then we can do policy enforcement on top of that. So here you can see we may have virtual network to virtual network running in Azure. Those networks, those virtual networks may be in the same region, they may be in different regions. We really want that all to disappear from a customer perspective. The only thing you cannot hide is latency. Latency, again, is fundamentally about the distance that the compute resides from each other or from the end users. So that's kind of what we've been driving. And then you see here the people. Again, you may have people, most people have people, using your devices. So SSL VPN using OpenVPN. Again, all doing standardized protocols, coming in, giving path selection, trying to simplify the complexity overall of how we bring this all together. Now, what this enables here is now we have a global transit architecture using the Azure Virtual WAN. But again, this is not done by us. We run this high-level service, but we work with our partners and our partner ecosystem. And because we selected IPsec, our partner ecosystem includes the SD-WAN, the new SD-WAN providers, but also includes traditional VPN providers. So if you just have IPsec, then you can be part of this ecosystem and coming in. Because there's a whole lot of VPNs deployed and customers still using IPsec VPN. And so we want those. We don't want everything to be a greenfield type of deployment. And so we're partnering with everybody you can see here. And so we have a bunch that we did demos last week with. We have new coming in, and you can see the open nature of Microsoft here, right? So a new partner here is VeloCloud, a VMware company. And so we gave a demo last week as well. So if you're a full VMware shop, you can use Velo on premises coming into Azure, and we have Azure VMware services. Again, fundamentally, how we think about all this, how do we solve the customer problem? So this is kind of the CPE side. But again, how do you bring this all together? So we have a new program called the Managed Service Provider Program. How do we help you help our customers? And these are going to be mutual customers among us, giving you an opportunity to add value on top of what we do. So again, we do self-service. The customer wants full service. Here's an opportunity for you to come in and manage that. So you can actually be in the Azure subscription. You can add and manage or create Azure resources for the customer and manage that for them. So here's a huge value add opportunity. So whether you're a network carrier or just networking expertise or networking system integrator, and we find this all over the world, there's very few people that actually understand how to run a network. So there's SIs, global SIs that help you virtualize your applications, move it to the cloud, but nobody's really helping the customer run their virtual network topologies. How do you run the virtual network itself? How do you think about all that stuff? That's the opportunity, and that's what this MSP program is about. And so we've been working with the carriers. And so you can run this, and you can add value on top of any of the Azure networking services by doing this. So it's very simple, and from our perspective, we don't even know that it's being managed, right? So the customer gave you permission to be in their subscription. You're managing all that. So my key message here is that all the Azure revenue and Microsoft Cloud revenue is dependent on network carriers. We don't have last mile. We don't have Spectrum. So I spend most of my time thinking about how can I incentivize network carrier sales teams to offer value-added services to really solve these customer problems. So I'll be around later today. Happy to talk to you about that. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you and give you our perspective on SD-WAN.